following letter from my father. My dear Victor, you have probably waited impatiently for a letter to fix the date of your return to us. And I was first tempted to write only a few lines, merely mentioning the day on which I should expect you. But that would be a cruel kindness, and I dare not to do it. What would be your surprise, my son, when you expected a happy and glad welcome to behold? On the contrary, tears and wretchedness. And how, Victor, can I relate our misfortune? Absence cannot have rendered you callous to our joys and griefs. And now shall I inflict pain on my long absent son? I wish to prepare you for the woeful news, but I know it is impossible. Even now your eye skims over the page to seek the words which are to convey to you the horrible tidings. William is dead.
What?
That sweet child, whose smiles delighted and warmed my heart, who was so gentle yet so gay. Victor, he is murdered.
Remember that gay at this point in time means happy. So he is probably not a homosexual child. Awesome. William is dead. This is what Dad is writing.
Saying I think it would be a problem if he was.
What? There's nothing wrong with him being gay, correct? If it is beyond happy.
Well, in the 1700s,
It
according
would
he
be.
probably would not be.
Oh boy, would be lynched.
Okay. So this is what all the other classes are getting to. Okay, great. All right. So go ahead.
I will not attempt to console you, but will simply relate the circumstances of the transaction. Last Thursday, May 7th, I, my niece, and your two brothers went to walk in the Plain Palace.
Sure.
The evening was warm and serene, and we prolonged our walk further than usual. It was already dusk before we thought of returning, and when we discovered that William and Ernest, who had gone on before, were not to be found. We accordingly rested on a seat until they should return. Presently, Ernest came and inquired if we had seen his brother. He said that he had been playing with him, that William had run away to hide himself, and that he vainly sought for him. Afterwards, waited for a long time, but he did not return. The account rather alarmed us, and we continued to search for him until the night fell, when Elizabeth conjectured that he might have returned to the house. He was not there. We returned again with torches, for I could not rest, when I thought that my sweet boy had lost himself, and I was exposed to all the damps and dews of the night. Elizabeth also suffered extreme anguish. About 5 a.m, I discovered my lovely boy, whom the night before I'd seen blooming and active in health, stretched on the grass, livid and motionless. The print of the murderer's finger was on his neck.
Remember that we do not have CSI or DNA at this point, so a print just tells us that someone grabbed his neck. That's all we know.
He was conveyed home, and the anguish that was visible in my countenance betrayed the secret to Elizabeth. She was very earnest to see the corpse. At first, I attempted to prevent her, but she persisted, and entering the room where it lay, hastily examined the neck of the victim. Clasping her hands, exclaimed, "Oh God, I have murdered my darling child." She fainted and was restored with extreme difficulty. When she again lived, it was only to weep and sigh. She told me that the same evening William had teased her to let him wear a very valuable miniature that she possessed of your mother. The picture is gone, and was doubtless the temptation which urged the murderer to the deed. We have no trace of him at present, although our exertions to discover him are unremitted, but they will not restore my beloved William.
Okay, I'm gonna have you pause for a second. All right, so the miniature that she is talking about is a necklace. So people would wear like lockets. So she had a locket. There must have been some kind of gem attached to it for her to say that it was. Oh, I like the
Or
picture.
picture.
Oh, cute. Okay, so there's a locket with the picture of Caroline, who is Frankenstein's mom. The little boy William was like, "Oh, I want to wear it." She gives it to him. He's wearing it. She now is blaming herself for the murder because she thinks that the expensive necklace he was wearing is what caused someone to murder him, that they were robbing him and that they killed him. That's what she thinks. Go ahead.
Come, dearest Victor, you alone can console Elizabeth. She weeps continually and accuses herself unjustly as the cause of his death. Her words pierce my heart. We are all unhappy, but will not that be an additional motive for you, my son, to return and be our comforter? Your dear mother, alas, Victor, I now say, thank God she did not live to witness the cruel, miserable death of her youngest darling. Come home, Victor, not brooding thoughts of vengeance against the assassin, but with feelings of peace and the gentleness that will heal instead of festering the wounds of our minds. Enter the house of mourning, my friend, but with kindness and affection for those who love you, and not with hatred for your enemies.
Okay, so come home, make us feel better. We're not asking you to find the murderer.
So that was a letter from Geneva, May 12th, 17.
Something. They don't give us the actual year.
Clerval, who had watched my countenance as I read this letter, was surprised to observe the despair that succeeded the joy I at first expressed on receiving news from my friends. I threw the letter on the table and covered my face with my hands. My dear Frankenstein, exclaimed Henry, when he perceived me weep with bitterness. Are you always to be unhappy? My dear friend, what has happened? I motioned him to take up the letter while I was walking up and down the room in extremest agitation. Tears also gushed from the eyes of Clerval as he read the account of misfortune. I can offer you no consolation, my friend, said he. Your disaster is irreparable. What do you intend to do? To go instantly to Geneva. Come with me, Henry, to order the horses. During our walk, Clerval endeavored to say a few words of consolation. He could only express his heartfelt sympathy. Poor William, said he. Dear lovely child, he now sleeps with his angel mother, who that had seen him bright and joyous in his young beauty, but must weep over his untimely loss. To die so miserably, to feel the murderer's grasp. How much more could a murder that could destroy radiant innocence? Poor little fellow, only one consolation have we. His friends mourn and weep, but he is at rest. The pang is over, his sufferings are at an end forever. A sod covers his gentle form, and he knows no pain. He can no longer be subject for pity. We must reserve that for his miserable survivors.
Okay, so pause for a second. Okay, so Clerval is being a very, very good friend in this instance because what can you say when somebody dies, right?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and then we say they're probably in heaven, this way. They're probably in heaven, they're probably with people who have gone before them, right? So we're just trying to make people feel better by any means possible. So that's what Clerval is doing, so he's actually a good friend. Okay, go for it.
Clerval spoke thus as we hurried through the streets. The words impressed themselves on my mind, and I remembered them afterwards in solitude. But now, as soon as the horses arrived, I hurried into a cabriolet and bade farewell to my friend. My journey was very melancholy. At first I wished to hurry on, for I longed to console and sympathize with my loved and sorrowing friends. But when I drew near my native town, I slackened my progress. I could hardly sustain the multitude of feelings that crowded into my mind. I passed through scenes familiar to my youth, but which I had not seen for nearly 6 years. How altered everything might be during that time. One sudden and desolating change had taken place, but 1,000 little circumstances might have been degrees worked on other alliterations, which altogether they were done more tranquilly, might not be the less decisive. Fear overcame me. I dared no advance, dreading 1,000 nameless evils that made me tremble. Although I was unable to define them, I remained 2 days at Lausanne, in a painful state of mind. I contemplated the lake. The waters were placid. All was calm, and the snowy mountains, the palaces of nature, were not changed. By degrees, the calm and the heavenly scene restored me, and I continued my journey towards Geneva.
Okay, so how many of you enjoy going out on the ocean when you are having a bad day? You like fishing, you like being on a boat, you enjoy that, yes?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So he is saying that nature can soothe you when nothing else can, which is true. Nice. Okay, go ahead.
The road ran by the side of the lake, which became narrower as I approached my native town, but I discovered more distinctly the black sides of Jura and the bright summit of Mont Blanc. I wept like a child. Dear mountains, my own beautiful lake, how do you welcome your wanderer? Your summits are clear, the sky and the lake are blue and placid. Is this to prognosticate peace?
Look that up.
Or to mock at my unhappiness? I fear, my friend, that I shall render myself tedious by dwelling on these preliminary circumstances. But they were of days of comparative happiness, and I think of them with pleasure. My country, my beloved country, who but a native can tell the delight I took in again, beholding thy streams, thy mountains, and more than all, thy lovely lake.
We get the point, nature is helping him.
Yet as I drew near home, grief and fear again overcame me. Night also closed around, and when I could hardly see the dark mountains, I felt still more gloomily. The picture appeared a vast dim scene of evil, and I foresaw obscurely that I was destined to become the most wretched of human beings. Alas, I prophesied and failed only in one single circumstance, that in all the misery I imagined and dreaded, I did not conceive the 100th part of the anguish I was destined to endure. It was completely dark when I arrived in the environs of Geneva. The gates of the town were already shut, and I was obliged to pass the night at Sekerna,
Where
a
is
vil-
Switzerland.
a village at distance of half a league from the city. The sky was serene, and as I was unable to rest, I resolved to visit the spot where my poor William had been murdered. As I could not pass through the town, I was obliged to cross the lake in a boat to arrive at the plain Palais. During this short voyage, I saw the lighting playing on the summit of Mont Blanc in the most beautiful figures. The storm appeared to approach rapidly, and on landing, I ascended a low hill that I might observe its progress. I advanced. The heavens were clouded, and I soon felt the rain coming slowly in large drops, but its violence quickly increased.
Okay, pause for a second. Okay, can you see me? Hi. Mary Shelley is doing this beautiful thing right now where she is pointing out how someone feels by mirroring that with the weather. So if it is storming outside, we are supposed to assume that he is storming inside. It gets good. Hang in there.
Where was I?
I quitted my seat.
I quitted my seat and walked on. Although the darkness and storm increased every minute, and the thunder burst with a terrific crash over my head. It was echoed from the Salève to the Juras and the Alps of Savoy. Vivid flashes of lightning dazzled my eyes, illuminating the lake and make it appear like a vast sheet of fire. Then for an instant, everything seemed of a pitchy darkness, until the eye recovered itself from the preceding flash. The storm, as is often the case in Switzerland, appeared once in various parts of the heavens. The most violent storm hung exactly north of the town, over the part of the lake which lies between the promontory of Bellerive and the village of Copet. Another storm enlightened Jura with the faint flashes, and another darkened and sometimes disclosed the mole, a peaked mountain to the east of the lake. While I watched the tempest, so beautiful yet terrific, I wandered on with a hasty step. The noble war in the sky elevated my spirits. I clasped my hands and exclaimed aloud, "William, dear angel, this is thy funeral and thy dirge."
Dirge is a fancy word for a funeral song.
As I said these words, I perceived in the gloom a figure which stood behind from a clump of trees near me.
What? Read that again.
I perceived in the gloom a figure which stole from behind a clump of trees near me. I stood fixed, gazing intently. I could not be mistaken. A flash of lightning illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me, its gigantic stature,
What?
and the deformity of its aspect more hideous than belongs to humanity. Instantly informed me that it was the wretch, the filthy demon to whom I had given life.
Da-da-da.
What did he there? Could he be? I shuddered at the conception. The murderer of my brother?
What?
No. Sooner did that idea cross my imagination than I became conceived of its truth.
Convinced.
My teeth chattered, and I was forced to lean against the tree for support. The figure passed me quickly, and I lost it in the gloom. Nothing in human shape could have destroyed the fair child. He was the murderer. I could not doubt it. The mere presence of the idea was an irresistible proof of the fact. I thought pursuing the devil, but it would have been in vain, for another flash discovered him to me hanging among the rocks of the nearly perpendicular ascent of Mont Saleve, a hill that bounds the plain Palais on the south. He soon reached the summit and disappeared.
Okay, so this is our second sighting of the monster, right? Because our first sighting was in his room and he ran away. Victor ran away, and then the monster just wasn't there when he got back. Now, do we have any evidence that the monster is the murderer?
No.
Nothing. We have no evidence, but he immediately assumes it is him. Okay,
Yeah.
go.
Devil,
Devil.
monster,
Go for
wretch.
No one can conceive the anguish I suffered during the remainder of the night.
Which I spent cold and wet in the open air, but I did not feel the inconvenience of the weather. My imagination was busy in scenes of evil and despair. I considered the being whom I had cast among mankind, and endowed with the will and the power to effect purposes of horror, such as the deed which he had now done, nearly in the light of my own vampire, my own spirit let loose from the grave, and forced to destroy all that was dear to me. Day dawned, and I directed my steps towards the town. The gates were open, and I hastened to my father's house. My first thought was to discover what I knew of the murderer, and cause instant pursuit to be made. But I paused when I reflected on the story that I had to tell. A being whom I myself had formed and endued with life had met me at midnight among the precipices of an inaccessible mountain. That I remembered also the nervous fever which I had been seized just at the time that I dated my creation, and which would give an air of delirium to the tale otherwise so utterly improbable. I well knew that if any other had communicated such a relation to me, I should have looked upon it as the ravings of insanity.
Okay, what did he just say?
If I say this, I'm crazy.
Yep, go for it.
Besides, the strange nature of the animal would elude all pursuit, even if I were so far credited to persuade my relatives to commence it. And then of what use would it be pursued? Who could arrest a creature
A creeper.
capable of scaling the overhanging sides of Mont Salif? These reflections determined me, and I resolved to remain silent.
Okay, I'm gonna have you stop there. Thank you.